Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about WizWar, a study in great board game design. I'm going to talk about this game. This is my copy of WizWar. It's the 1991 edition. There were a lot of different editions out there. And I want to talk about this because I think there's a lot of good lessons you could learn about making a board game from this little teeny board game. I've talked about playing this game before. It was in a video about after hours game playing at Interplay. I will link it below. WizWar was one of them. Yes, this is a board game. It's probably better subcategoried into the beer and pretzels games. That's what they used to call them, because while it's a board game, it's designed to be very simple. It's simple to explain to people, very simple to play, very fast. I think a game of WizWar could take 10 or 20 minutes. We had some that went on longer, but in general, I'll describe the rules to you and you'll see why this could be a very, very fast game to play. In fact, let me explain the rules right now because they're super simple. So, you have a wizard. You play a wizard, and you start on a spot on a dungeon tile. So the board itself is made up of these tiles. And you can see they have the walls in different locations, but there's always a start spot in the center. They go together. If there's two players, you can put them together like this, or like this, or like this. If there's three players, you use three, and it forms an L, and this part is connected. They're all connected on their outer edges. They warp around and connect. So you're basically playing this big, randomly shifting board every single time you play, which is, by the way, one of the reasons I like it. It's a very simple win condition for your wizard. You win if you can get 2 treasures onto your starting spot. Or, alternatively, you're the last surviving wizard. Notice I didn't say you had to kill all the other ones. Sometimes they would get killed on their own. What I love about that is there's a rule, though, that a wizard can only carry 1 treasure. Once you have 1 treasure in your hand, you cannot carry any other treasure, which means you have to go back to your start point, drop it, and then go out to find your second one. So, of course, while you were out looking for the second one, the other wizards would sometimes come and just grab the one off your start spot. Perfectly valid strategy. Every wizard gets a hand of spell cards. And these are really cool. They're mostly spells. They're really cool cards. They're mostly spells and then a few numbers to adjust them. They can be spells that just directly do damage, like you lightning bolt someone, or fireball, and it does any wizard in that area. You can summon things. You can summon a wall, which is along an edge, which can block a hallway. You can also summon an entire solid block, which you can use. You can put down an intersection, and then that blocks every direction. You can make all kinds of traps. You can make pits, which if a wizard is moving along, if they want to get past that, they have to fall in and immediately stop their turn, and then they have to use their next turn to climb out. You can also make things like thorn bushes, which you can move through, but it causes damage. And the pit doesn't block line of sight, but the thorn bush does. And line of sight is because some spells require line of sight to where you're throwing it and some don't. You can also summon all kinds of monsters. Most are under your control and they move where you want. Some just move around randomly. In general, when monsters see another wizard, they attack it. So there's all kinds of things happening like that. There's also spells that affect movement. You can teleport yourself. You can teleport another wizard. You can move treasures around. You can move the other objects in the game around. You can change how the tiles connect, which literally changes the graph of dungeon tiles. And then on top of all that, as if that's not rich enough, there are counter spells that you can get in your hand. There are spells that cancel spells, that reflect. So someone lightning bolts you and you're like, reflect, and it goes back. There's even a spell to cancel counter spells. I think it's called anti-anti. So if someone does a counter spell, you can counter the counter spell. Crazy. There's 1 die in the game, a simple D4. Sometimes it's used to determine damage. Sometimes you can play a number card to have damage. You could use it to pick random directions. There's even a spell, I think it's called Thumb of God, where you throw it at the board, or you flick it, I think. And if it hits something and knocks it into a new position, that's the new place it is. It's a weird game. I love it. Let me tell you what I think you as a designer should learn from a game like WizWar. First of all, the rules are very, very simple. There's not much more you need to know than what I already told you. Most of the rules are on the card. So, a lightning bolt spell says on the card what to do. The rule book, which is a very, it's almost like a rule pamphlet. It is there basically just to explain kind of interactions, if these things happen, how to adjudicate it. But you don't need a lot of those. I particularly love the randomness in this game. The board is randomly, you pick the tiles at random, you rotate them at random, and you assemble them. So it's different every time. It's different shaped. The more players there are, the more tiles you need. The cards are random. You get a random hand of cards, and as you use them and you draw more cards, it's just random. There are also cards that let you hold more cards. There are let you cards that steal cards from other people. I love that does have a die, even though it's a simple D4. I love the randomness that can happen in damage and in directions and all that. What all this amounts to is there is so much replayability in this simple game. It's simple to explain, it's simple to play, you're done in 15, 20 minutes, but there's so much replayability that WizWar became one of the most popular games that we played at Interplay. If people came new that night, we could explain the rules to them in 2 minutes. We often had the new person at the table win because there's a lot of randomness, and there's also people fighting. Some people treat the win condition as, I'm going to ignore the treasures. I'm just going to kill every other wizard and then I'll be alive. While others are like letting the other wizards fight it out and just quietly grabbing treasures and maybe teleporting around so they're hard to stop. We loved this game so much that we extended the rules, and they encourage you to do so. It comes with blank cards. So we made new cards. If you Google my name and WizWar, you can still find them online. I used to host them. I had a web space at UCI when I was a grad student there, which I still was in 91 when I started playing this game. It disappeared after a while, but luckily it's reflected in at least one place. I checked this morning, and it's still up there. You can see all the cards we created. It's super fun. That's what I love. One of the cards we made, I remember, we used to play, and we had so many wizards that figured out that summoning things was the way to go, summoning walls and pits and thorn bushes and lots of monsters moving around, that we made a new monster called the Maid. And all the Maid does is walk around in random directions for a random distance every time it's the Maid's turn. And all she does is anything she touches gets cleaned up, gets taken off the game. She ignores wizards and she ignores treasures, but anything else she touches that has been summoned or created onto the board, she cleans and wipes out. Thorn bushes, pits, walls, the Maid gets rid of them. I should tell you there's one other game, and mine's buried in a box somewhere. I found WizWar, but I couldn't find it. There's one other game that the designer of this game, his name is Tom Jolly. You're brilliant, Tom Jolly. He made another one called Gootmoo, which was similar. What they did is they had random board tiles like this one, but there were no cards. Instead, whenever it was your turn, you rolled a die to see how many spaces you could go, but then you'd look on the board to see, like, if I go two directions, let's say you roll two. If I go two this way, I'll land on a tile that tells me to do this. If I go two this way, I'll land on a tile that tells me to do this. So even though you you kind of want to go somewhere, you're trying to pick up these units, I think they're called, that once you get 3 of them, you get to get out of the maze and you win. So Gootmoo stands for Get Out of the Maze Unit. So you're trying to pick up these units and you're trying to collect all 3. But at the same time, because you move a random distance each time and every square on the board tends to do something to you. Remember, these boards are randomly put down and rotated just like WizWar. You sometimes didn't want to go directly to where your unit was because the roll you made had you land on a square that's pretty bad for you. I love this game too. But WizWar, as my first Tom Jolly game, will always have just that spot in my heart. I do think there's a lot to learn from playing simple games like this, including how simplicity doesn't have to be boring and repetitive. In fact, WizWar is anything but. Highly recommend it. There are new editions, old editions, whichever ones you can find. I'm sure it'll be fun. Anyway, that's my thoughts on WizWar.